Welcome to the Excess Soil Registry training session on reuse notice filings. So we're very pleased to have you joining us today to give you a preview of what the notice filing process will look like, as well as the registry. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what to expect today, and then some house rules, and then I'll pass you on to the main speakers for today. So we'll have a bit of an introduction about ourselves, RPRA, and about the registry from our manager of the registry support team and in-house Excess Soil Registry expert, Pamela. And she'll also do a bit of expectation setting. And then John Conway from PwC, who has helped us build the registry, will give us an overview of the reuse filing, and will also give us a demonstration of how to file a reuse notice filing. And then Pam will give you an overview of what else we have available in terms of training. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A session, maybe more, depending on how quickly it takes us to get through everything else. And then there will be some feedback just for us to know how you found the session. Okay, just some house rules before we get started. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. We would like you to use that Q&A button to ask any questions you have today. We have 15 minutes for questions, so we might not get to all your questions, and any that we don't answer live, we'll try to answer in writing. Any questions that you would like answered live today, please upvote. So there's a functionality in the Q&A to upvote questions. So if you would like us to answer them during the webinar, please upvote those questions. And then everything else, as I said, we will answer in writing. This webinar is being recorded. So at the end of the webinar, we will share, also at the end of the day today, we will share a recording of the webinar as well as the presentation slides. But we will also share via email to let you know that that is on our website. And once we have all the questions from not only today's webinar, but also the two previous webinars, once we have the answers together from the questions that we didn't get to answer, we will also email them to all participants who signed up for any of the webinars we've been hosting this week and last week. One last thing. Please make sure you have your name as an attendee, like your full name, because when we do the question and answer rounds, I would like to call out who asked the question, but also for our records, especially when we're doing the written answers to your questions, it's useful for us to know who asked the questions. It gives us context when we try to answer them. Okay, I think that's it for me for house rules. I will pass you over now to Pam.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Castillo, and I'm the Compliance Manager of Registry Support here at RPRA. So this is our third session that we've hosted to introduce the regulated community to the Excess Soils Registry. So in each of the sessions, I have talked about who RPRA is and sort of what we've been mandated to do. And so I will keep this even shorter than I did for the project area training session that we did a couple of days ago. But essentially, we've been mandated by the Government of Ontario to provide a digital reporting service for a wide range of waste and resource recovery programs. We currently operate tires, batteries, ITTAB, registry portal, and now with this final edition of the Excess Soils Registry, which is helping drive Ontario toward a circular economy. What drove us to building the Excess Soils Registry is that we were directed by the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks to establish and operate a registry to enable regulated persons to comply with the registration and notice filing requirements outlined in the Excess Soils regulation that takes effect on January 1st. So yesterday was a very exciting day. We officially launched the registry, essentially a full month in advance before the reg takes effect. And this was possible through constant collaboration with industry stakeholders and the ministry itself, along with our partnership with PwC, who was our technical vendor. And we hope that you find the registry to be user-friendly and efficient for you to be able to file your notices. RPRA, again, is responsible for maintaining and establishing this registry, but the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks will continue to be responsible for any policy and program related to the excess soil, and they will continue to conduct the compliance and enforcement activities for this regulation. So in general, we're very happy to be able to support the industry with filing notices. And so maybe we'll get into the next sort of screen just so we can talk briefly about very high level what the registry is. So as I said before, we have currently 4 different portals, and essentially it's an online solution to allow regulated parties to register, report information, and provide payments to RPRA as a cost recovery organization. Traditionally, the information that we receive for the RRCA programs relate to corporate business information like name, address, and contact information of the business entity itself, and then the sales and supply chain information, which allows us to determine the producer's management requirements. A little bit different for the excess soils program. Similarities exist where we will be requiring information about the corporate business itself, but the information that will be retained in this portal is a little bit different as it relates to soil volumes and soil destination sites and things like that, and location properties. With all of the portals that we've created alongside our technical vendors, we've always been very cognizant of security and privacy. So that was always a critical consideration in the design, build, and operationalization of the registry. I will say this, though, that there is some information contained within notice filings that will be posted on the public registry, and that will be available, that is available via a link on our website. So I hope you look forward to John's demo today about getting into the specifics on how to file a reuse notice filing. So John, over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Pam. Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Conway. I am a functional specialist here with PwC Canada as part of our front office transformation team. And yes, it's my absolute pleasure to be running through the 3rd of our 3 training sessions, and this time we're doing a deep dive into our reuse filing. So for those of you who have seen some of our other sessions, I do have to turn my camera off again. My laptop doesn't like to have a camera and the screens up at the same time. So just wanted to say hello real quickly, but I'll turn that off for now and turn that back on at the end. So yeah, so before we start and before we go too deep into the training session, I will point out that as each of these sessions are designed to be standalone, any of you who may have attended or viewed the recordings of those previous sessions, there may be some overlaps of some of these common materials and then some of the concepts within the registry itself. Okay. So to set some expectations for these sessions, or this particular session, I should say, we will be showcasing some technical features of the registry as it exists today, and then we'll go through the functionality that's been built as well. We are not going to be going into the legal requirements of the regulation, and we will not be going into the interpretation or the enforcement of the regulation either. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to do a brief overview of the topics by using the slide deck, and then I'll jump into a live demonstration of the registry. So as Isabella said, we have allocated that 15 minutes for a Q&A session at the end. And then of course, RPRA is available to answer any further questions that you may have. So although this is the last of our 3 live training webinars today, we will also be recording a training video for how to navigate an RDSD filing as well. So stay tuned to the RPRA website for access to that one. So in today's session, we are going to do that deep dive into the reuse notice filing. I will show how to initiate that filing from the registry homepage. I will explain how you can share the filing with a third party if you so choose to do so. And then I will walk through the entire notice filing itself, so from start to finish. We'll make that initial submission of the filing, and then we will return to update the filing and turn it into a final submission. Finally, I will show you how you can actually download PDF summaries of your filing and the invoices that are generated after selecting that payment method. So again, for the benefit of those of you who may have missed or not seen any of the previous training sessions, this slide is just a brief overview of the Excess Soil Registry as a whole. So for the Excess Soil program specifically, there are 3 portals that make up the registry. First, we have the registry for industry users. So this is where our industry users can log in with account details and they can complete those excess soil filings and meet the compliance requirements. And that's what I'm going to show today. Secondly, we have the Public Soils Registry that Pam just alluded to. So this is where certain details which are associated with our filings will be shared for public access. The public has the ability to log into that access the portal without any login, and there is no registration required to access the public portal. And then finally, the third portal is the ministry portal. So any information which is included in the excess soil notice filings that is shared with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks in order for them to manage their compliance and policy efforts. The only information which is excluded from that is any information related to fees or financial information. So in order to make that filing today, I will be representing an industry user and I will be utilizing the registry portal. So as I just sort of said, the industry users can log in or they can create that account by accessing the registry from registry.rpra.ca and then clicking through to the Excess Soil program. And because how to create an account and access the soils program itself, that was covered in a previous session. I'm not going to cover that again. However, at the end, I do have a link to that particular session. And so you can access those training materials from that link. And all of that information can be accessed from the RPRA website as well. So in the registry portal, there are 3 types of filings that can be completed. And of course, today we are going to be focusing on the reuse site. So as is stated here, the reuse site refers to a site at which excess soil is used for an identifiable beneficial purpose and does not include a waste disposal site. So this slide actually explains the life cycle that each of our filings goes through. So when that filing is first initiated, it should be considered to be in progress. And another way to think of that is as a draft filing. At the in progress stage itself, the filing could be incomplete, and so it won't be visible on the public portal and no fees are required. I'll point out that filing data is visible to MECP on their ministry portal, all of our statuses, including our in progress, so that's before that submission has actually even been made. A filing will remain at this in progress stage until it has been submitted. And a filing cannot actually be submitted until all of the required data has been entered, a completed declaration document has been uploaded, and that payment has been arranged for any of the applicable fees. So only at that point does the submission status change to initial submission. The filings with that initial submission status, they become immediately visible on the public portal as well. So should then a user come back to initial submission and decide to make any changes to any of the data within the filing, the submission status will change to an updated submission, and that will reflect that a change was made to the initial filing. So it is an important step in doing this in order to keep the data up to date, and there isn't a fee in order to update a notice filing at that stage. The updated data, again, it will be reflected immediately on your filing, and that's going to be visible to both public and ministry portals. Then in order to progress from either the initial submission or the updated submission to a final submission, all of the required information for the filing needs to be entered, including that final submission declaration and a final fee payment, again, if it's applicable. So once that final submission has been made, the data can no longer be updated, and all of the information in the filing, except as I said, for payment information, that will be visible on the public and ministry portals. And then just a very quick note on fees at this point. So the fees that you'll see when I walk through the demonstration live, they are there for demonstration purposes, and they're to show the functionality of the submission process. Each type of filing that we have within the registry requires the details for different types of contacts. So there are 5 types of contacts which are associated with a reuse filing. Of those 5 different types, the filing must be initiated by either an owner, an operator, or an authorized person. So I'll go through the definitions very quickly. An owner is defined as the owner of the reuse site, and an operator is the person who has charge, management, or control of the site. So for both of those user types, both of these contact details, they're required to be entered, regardless of who it was that initiated the notice. An authorized person, they are defined as a person authorized by the owner, operator, or project leader to file the notice on their behalf. So although an authorized person must have a registry account with their contact details in order to be able to access the registry and then initiate or submit the filing, their contact information itself is not required for reuse filing. And so it's not actually gathered during the notice preparation. The contact details of a site contact, as defined here as an authorized person on site who can be contacted, that is also going to be required for a reuse filing. Then optionally, you have the option to add in the contact details of multiple qualified persons who develop the site-specific excess soil quality standards for the reuse site. So we'll have a bit of a look at the journey that we are going to go on in order to complete a reuse notice filing. Our first step when initiating any filing is to go through the pre-screening questions in order to determine our eligibility or our requirement to actually proceed with making the notice filing. Next, we move on to selecting the role that we are playing in the reuse notice filing, and then we have an additional optional step of assigning notice access to another company in order to complete the filing on our behalf. Then we're going to get on into the details of the reuse site as defined by the regulation. So we start by entering the contact details for each contact that is required to be listed. We'll enter in details about the site itself, any property locations within it, any applicable site instruments, and then we'll detail the property uses. Next, we start entering in the details of the excess soil amounts which are associated with our reuse site, before moving on to our review so we can review all of the data that we've entered so far. Only once we are content with all of the data that we've entered, the initial submission can be made by paying an initial fee if it's applicable, or simply by clicking on the submit button if no fee is required, and I'll definitely show that today. Then when we're completed, we're required to return to the registry in order to make that final submission. So at this stage, we will confirm the final amounts of excess soil that were deposited and the date of the last deposit. We can make a final submission by paying that final fee again if it's applicable, or we can click on that submit button if no fees are required. So again, because this presentation, it is going to be available as a referenceable material, I do have a slide here that goes into a bit more detail about what is required in each one of these sections. I'm going to cover it fairly quickly because I'm also going to be demonstrating each of these points during the demonstration itself. So within the filing, you will see chevrons like these, and they're used to mark out different sections of requirements. So the chevrons, they provide a bit of a handy reference as you progress through your filing, and they can also be used for general navigation as well. So for example, should you need to return to edit the details of the operator who's associated with the filing, then you can access the contact details section directly from the review or from the summary page. Now, lastly, before we jump into the demonstration, we have constructed a scenario that we will be playing out today. So in this particular scenario, the project is the redevelopment of a former rail yard to recreational and community use. There is fragmented ownership on the land, and all landowners have come to an agreement to allow the redevelopment to proceed. And you see our owners are listed below. Thorn Soil wants to convert the land from industrial and commercial land use to community and recreational use and will operate the reuse site. This site is poorly linked to the City of Toronto's road, transit, and wastewater collection networks. It is estimated that the reuse site will accept up to 225,000 cubic meters of excess soil in total. It will be operational effective as of March 31st, 2022, and the project will terminate on January 31st, 2025. You'll also see that Thorn Soil has retained the services of a qualified person from AECON Consultants in order to undertake an assessment to establish the current site condition of the soil and groundwater to ensure the site is appropriate to be used as a resource site, a reuse site for the purposes of their project. The QP will ensure that it receives excess soil only from source sites that have been pre-approved based on a protocol determined by the source site and receiving site QPs. Okay, so now that we've actually set that scene for the filing, I'm going to open up another screen and I can show the registry homepage. Great. Okay, so you should all see our registry homepage here. So we're starting on the Excess Soil Registry homepage. And as you can see, I'm logged into my account as Jax McKenna, and my company name, Thorn Soil, is listed on the top left here. So on this page, you'll be able to see a list of all the filings that you have created and a list of any filings that have been shared with you. So you can click on the column headings to sort your list of filings. You can see we have 23 entries in total. So you can click on any of these column headings to sort by, let's say, last updated date. Any of the filings that have been shared with another company or shared with you by another company, they will have a check mark in the shared access box like so. And then the actions which are available to you are going to depend on the status of that submission. So any filing which is currently in progress will show continue as an action, like here. Those are at an initial submission stage will show update or finalize. And those in a final submission, the only action available to us is view, as it cannot be edited at that point. So in order to initiate the new notice filing, we are going to click on the Initiate New Notice button on the top right here. This is going to be the same process for all of our filing types. On this pop-up here, once we're happy with the information, we can click on Proceed, and then we were brought to a Select Notice Filing Type page. On this screen, we can choose which of our filing types we'd like to initiate. So for the purposes of this demo, of course, I'm going to select on a reuse notice, but you can refer to our previous training sessions on project area notice or the upcoming video for an RDST notice as well. So I'm selecting my reuse site notice and clicking on Next. When we start any of our notice filings, we are met with one or several pre-screening questions, and that depends on the filing type which is selected. So as I said before, the pre-screening questions, they are designed to ensure that we meet the criteria or the eligibility to initiate that filing. For the reuse notice filing specifically, we're advised to review the filing requirements by clicking through to the RPRA website here. Once I'm comfortable with the filing requirements, I can indicate my intention to proceed by clicking on Yes, and then certifying that that information is true and correct. The next part of initiating a reuse notice is to select our role. So as I said before, the reuse notice filing can only be initiated by the owner, an operator, or by an authorized person. I'll point out at this stage that these information icons here, they are available to you throughout the registry, and they'll provide extra guidance for a particular question or a field or a page that you may be on. So if I click on these information icons, I can see the definition for each of these role types. So for an operator, it's defined as the person having the charge, management, or control of a site. And then for an authorized person, an authorized person is someone authorized by the project leader, owner, or operator of a site to complete the notice and pay fees on their behalf. So as you can see in the bottom right there, the gray Next button, that has been grayed out. So that indicates that there is an action that needs to be taken on this page in order to proceed. And there's also some conditional logic which is associated with the role selection up here. Essentially means that I can select my role as the owner, I can select my role as the operator, or I can select my role as the authorized person individually. I can select that I am both the owner and the operator. However, if I select the authorized person, I cannot be both an owner and an authorized person or an operator and an authorized person. So if I select that I am an authorized person, I must certify that that I am responsible for filing the notice and paying any applicable fees on behalf of an owner or operator in order to be able to proceed, like so. So for the purposes of this demo, if you may remember, I'm representing Jax McKenna from Thornhill, who is the operator of the reuse site. So I will select my role is as the operator. Okay, So at this point, we've actually initiated the notice. So that means that we have been provided with a notice ID, which is available at the top right here, and that our progress is going to be saved as we proceed throughout the filing. So if any reason we leave the filing, we can always return to this specific filing by looking for this notice ID on our dashboard. Then to return to the dashboard, and we can do this at any point throughout the filing, we can click on this back to dashboard button on the top left. I'll also point out here are those 5 chevrons that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And each of those chevrons represents a section of the filing and shows our progress as well. Now, this particular section, this is called our notice access section. So providing that notice access to another company, that was actually provided in our first training sessions, but I will do a brief reminder here as well. So by clicking on Manage Notice Access, I can choose to provide access to all of the registered users at another company in order to edit or complete most of this filing on my behalf. All I need to do is click on the Add Company and then search for the company that I'd like to provide access. So if I search for Bob Soil, I can select the Bob Soil company. That will show me the available users at that company. I can select one to be my contact person and make sure this box is checked to ensure they have access to the filing. I acknowledge that I'm granting access to them, providing authorization to view and edit the notice filing fields, and then I click on Save. So you can see that this page has now been updated to show the details of the company that's been provided the access to this specific filing. And I can hover over this view link and I can see details of the company and the contact that I have assigned. If I wish to revoke access to the registry users at Bob Soil, I just click on Manage Notice Access again, uncheck this, check our certification, and click Save again. You can see there are now no companies that have been provided access to this notice. So as a reminder, this is purely an optional step. It is not required to assign notice access to another company in order to continue with the filing. The company that you provide that notice access to, they will be able to complete most parts of the filing. However, they cannot actually view or update this notice access page themselves. They cannot make any submissions, and they cannot view any fee payments or financial information. Now, because this was an optional step, I can proceed to the next page without entering in any additional information. So we're now on the second chevron of the filing, the contact details filing section. Now, the regulation requires the details of at least 3 types of contacts associated with the reuse filing. Those are the owner, the operator, and the site contact. Each of those contacts, they could be the same person, they could be a combination of the same person and new people. But on this first page, we're asked to enter in the details of the owner. This is a great opportunity for me to show what happens if you try and move forwards with a page on the registry without filling in all of the required fields. So if we click on Save and Next, you can see our required fields are highlighted in red with the text below it to help you understand what we are missing. So I'm going to start entering in, because as you remember, we have our scenario here, so I can actually start entering in the details of one of our 3 owners. I am going to add in the details of those additional owners in another screen in a second. So I'll start just by adding in our first, which is Jackie Stewart. Her phone number. And her email. Okay. So I just want to draw your attention here to this checkbox. The owner is also the contact for this site. If this box is ticked on this page or any of our following contact pages, then we will not be asked to re-enter in the details for a site contact. So I'm going to leave it unchecked for the purposes of this demo. So if you remember, our site contact is our developer, Jax McKenna, who I'm currently logged in as. So I'll enter in the rest of her information here. And once I'm happy with the owner contact details, I can click on Save and Next to progress. So the second page here, it looks very similar, but this is asking for the contact details of the operator of the site. Now, as I had selected my role as Jax McKenna as the operator on that role selection screen, my details have already been pre-filled here for me. But I still have that option and the ability to be able to edit any of the details. For example, if my phone number doesn't seem quite right, or I wanted to change an email address or something like that. So on this checkbox here, operator is also the contact for the site. Although we know that Jax is also the site contact for a reuse site, I just want to show you what this flow looks like if you have a different site contact, and then I will come back to that page. So once I'm happy with all the information for my operator here, once more I click on Save and Next. Now we see this page here is asking for our site contact information. That's because I didn't check that contact is also the site contact on any of those previous pages. And that's why I'm being asked to enter this information in manually. So if I had selected that checkbox on a previous page, this page actually wouldn't show. And the other contact, their roles and their details, that would be registered as the site contact as well. So I can demonstrate this. If I click on back to go back to the operator page, and this time I do select the box, and then I can move forwards. Okay, you can see now that I've bypassed that site contact page entirely, and it was my details that were automatically used. And this is going to take us to our final page under the contact details chevron. It's another optional page, so I can click Save and Next to regress without entering any information here. This one gives me the ability to add in any additional owners or additional operators who are also associated with my reuse site. In order to add those additional contacts to the filing, I can click on the Add Additional Contacts button, and it's going to open up a pop-up for me. As you can see right from the top here, I can select which additional contact that I'm choosing to add to the filing. So I can choose to add an additional owner, or I can choose to add an additional operator, or I can choose to add somebody who is fulfilling both roles. So for this demonstration and for the scenario, we have 3 owners' contact details to enter into the filing. If you remember, we previously entered in the details of only one of those owners. Therefore, on this page, this is where I can add in the details of those other 2 owners. So give me a second here while I write out details of our owner number 2, sorry. Okay, and once I'm happy with the information there, I can click on Add. So as you can see, their details have been added onto our table here, and their role as an additional owner has been selected. Now, as sometimes the details that are entered here are going to be longer than the space on the table, you see that some of the information has been cut off. If you hover your mouse over that particular record, you'll see this extra text pop up to show you the full details which are in that particular field. On the table, I now also have 2 new options which are available to me under the action column here, update or remove. So I can choose to update or change the details which are associated with the contact by clicking on the update button, and that will take me back to the page I was just on. So it'll allow me to do something like change the mistake I made when entering in the email address. So I can click on save again, and that information has now been updated here. So I'll now add in the details of our 3rd owner. Click on Add Additional Contacts again, select the owner checkbox, and then begin writing in their details. Once more, once I'm happy with the information on that page, I can click on Add again. So now I have the details of both of my additional owners added to this page. So once I'm happy with all the information here, I can click on Save and Next, and I can progress to the next section of the filing, which is our site details section. So the first page of the site details chevron, this is where we can gather all of the required information about the site itself. Each reuse site filing, it must be assigned a site name, which we can enter in here. And then we can also enter in a description. So I have some pre-prepared data, which I can copy and paste in here for a site name. I can also enter in a description. Copy and paste that in here. Now, when you see these larger text boxes like this, they do have a 255 character limit. So if you're not aware, that's probably I think it's about a sentence more than what I've already entered in here, just to give you an idea of how much information is actually available to put in. So now for my type of undertaking, I can select from the drop-down, select our community and recreational value. And then I can also put in the description of the undertaking here. So once more, once I'm happy with all of the information that I've entered onto that page about our site, I can click on Save and Next. So on the second page of our site details, we can add in the property locations which are associated with a reuse site. So we do understand that there may be multiple properties within a reuse site. So this table, in a very similar way to how the additional contacts table worked, it allows us to enter, update, or remove multiple properties. In order to add in that new property location, we just click on the Add New Property button. And I will show if you click Add without entering in any information, the system again is going to prompt you for your missing pieces. So you will notice right at the start here, or quite close to the top, the primary property checkbox. For every filing where there are multiple properties that can be added, we do require one of those properties to be considered as the primary property. And this will also be indicated as such on the public registry as well. By default, we have it so that the first property that you add is considered to be the primary property. Then if any other properties are added, or if another property is updated and it's indicated that they are the primary property, then this property's checkbox would become unselected as the property. So then in the circumstance where a property has been selected as a primary property, we do require the geographical coordinates. And you can see that's indicated by this error text here. So if the property is added, it's not a primary property, then the latitude and the longitude is not a required field, and I can show that in a second. So for the first property location, which is added to a filing, it will be considered as primary by default. And so we do need to enter in the latitude and the longitude information. So as I said with the project area filing, a quick little tip if you're looking for the latitude and longitude information, if you don't have it to hand, is you can open up Google Maps, right-click somewhere on the map, and the geographical coordinates are the top piece of information when you right-click. You can click that once, and it copies the information to your clipboard, so you can paste in the geographical coordinates wherever you need them. Okay. The next piece that I'll point out when adding in the property is that you are required to enter in the street address for the site, which can be indicated here, if it is known, or if it's not known, you can enter in a legal description of the property instead. And you can see we do have that prompt to remind you of that down below as well. The legal description itself, this could include any applicable pins, encumbrances, easements, or any other location references. So I'll enter in an example here. So we'll select Toronto as our community. The property description field is optional, so I'm going to leave it blank for this one. We know that the primary property is going to be checked by default. And let's work on the assumption that I don't know my municipal address, but I do know, or I do have, a legal description of the property and a PIN available. So I can paste that information in here, make that box a little easier to see. There we go. Now adding in the latitude and longitude, I can assume that I have some data available. I'll pull that information in from Google Maps. So once I'm happy with all the pieces of information on this page, I'll click on Add, and that information, very similar to our contacts table, has been added in. Now see the primary checkbox has been indicated here, and I have the option to update and adjust the details of that property, or I can remove it by clicking on this button here. So I'll add one more property location just to show that adjustment of when I'm adding a property that is not that primary property. So once more, if I scroll down to the bottom and I click on Add, you can see this time I'm not prompted for my geographical coordinates, but I am prompted for either a complete municipal address or a legal description. So let's go, oh, sorry, and the community and municipality up here. So I'll go back in and I'll enter in some information here. Once more, assume that I do not have a property description. So now you can see that that primary checkbox that has been removed. And so if I try to add it, it's not going to prompt me for the latitude and longitude. Once more, if I select the primary property is this one that I'm adding, then I try and add it, you'll see I'm prompted for my geographical coordinates again. Okay, so I'll add in a little bit more information. Once more, assume I don't have the municipal address. And again, I'll enter in a legal description and a PIN that I have available. As its primary property, I'm going to add in my latitude and my longitude. Like so. Okay, so I'm happy with the information on this page. I'm going to click on add again. And I just want to point out that the primary check has gone from that first property that we added onto the second property here. So now that I've added in the details of the property locations within that reuse site, I'm quite happy with that. I can click Save and Next to move on to the next page under the site details section. So similar to that functionality we've seen in the other parts of the registry already, this page is going to allow us to add, update, or remove multiple site instruments that are associated with my reuse site. To add a new instrument, I click on the Add Instrument button. And then the options on this page, they are going to adjust depending on the instrument type selection that I make. And that's that top field here. So as an example, should I select that my instrument type is a City of Toronto Act bylaw permit? You can see this field here, issuing authority, appears. And that allows me only to select the City of Toronto as the issuing authority. Alternatively, if I was to select a Municipal Act bylaw permit as my instrument type, you can see my list of issuing authorities becomes a lot longer. One more option or another option to look at, if I select on Other, I now have two new fields where I'm prompted to manually write in details about the other instrument type and also write in manually the details of the other issuing authority. So for the purposes of this demonstration, utilizing a scenario, I'm going to add in two instruments. The first one we say is a City of Toronto Act bylaw permit. So my issuing authority, of course, is the City of Toronto. Let's say my identification number for that particular instrument. This one has been issued to myself as Jax McKenna. And then I can select an instrument issue date using this date selector here. Let's say that it was September 25th. Once I'm happy, I can click on Add. So as you can see, that instrument's been added to the table, and I have those same options to update or remove that entry as it's required. So now I can add in that next entry in very much the same way. Click on Add Instrument. Maybe this time my instrument type is an Environmental Protection Act Certificate of Property Use. Select MECP as my issuing authority. I'll throw in identification number here. Once more, this one has been issued to myself. And maybe the instrument date for this one is slightly different, 6th of August, 2021. And click on Add. There we go, and the table has been updated. So once more, once I'm happy with all the details and the information on this page, I can click Save and Next to progress on to the next one. So the property use page on the site details section, this is going to allow me to select all of the property uses which are applicable to the reuse site. I can select multiple current property uses and also multiple future property uses as well. If I should select Other for either the current property use or a future property use and try to move forwards, you'll see that I am required to provide additional details for some further information. So let's say for the purposes of this particular demo, I'm going to select Community and Industrial as my current property use, and Community and Parkland only for my future property use. Once more, click on Save and Next, and I've been able to progress to the next section. So we are now on the soil details section. First page of the soil details section, this is going to ask me to enter in the applicable excess soil quality standards for my reuse site. We have three options on this page that we can select. The first one is the From Excess Soil Quality Standard tables. The second one is site-specific excess soil quality standard with BRAT or risk assessment. And the third one is site-specific excess soil quality standard from a site instrument. So depending on the selection that we make, we will be asked to supply some further information. if I select the first option from Excess Soil Quality Standard tables, you can see that we are asked to enter in the soil quality standard tables that are applicable in this table below. In a very similar way to what we've seen before, in order to add an entry onto this table, I can click on the Add from Excess Soil Quality Standard table. We can select the applicable volume, which will define the applicable tables which are available to us, and then the type of property use. So once I've selected those, I can click on Add. And you can see that this has been added to our table. In a very similar way, when I select the site-specific excess soil quality standard with a BRAT or risk assessment, you can see that I'm asked to provide further details of the qualified person that developed the site-specific quality standard using BRAT or risk assessment. Functionality is very similar again. In order to add a QP, I can click on this button here. And you can see that I'm asked for details of the qualified person here. So as per our scenario, we have the details of Devin Piper. And then I can click on Add to add Devin's details to our table. Then finally, our third checkbox up here, this actually does not have any follow-up actions required, so you can just select the site-specific excess soil quality standard from Site Instrument. Now, you may have noticed that these top two checkboxes, they have now been grayed out. This is because you cannot uncheck an option if there is data entered in the corresponding table below. So this will avoid any issues with it. Unselecting this deletes or removes all of the information which has been added to either one of these tables below. So if I do want to change or unselect one of these options, I would have to make sure that a table below is empty. You can do that just by clicking on the Remove button. And you can see now I can actually unselect that initial one. Then finally, at the bottom of this page, I have an additional information box where I can add in any further information as I choose, but this is an optional field, so I can proceed without entering in any information here. Once more, when I'm happy with the entries that I've selected on this page, I can click on Save and Next to progress. Now, the final page under the soil details section, this is the soil details themselves. And all four of these fields, they are all required fields. The first two fields at the top here, these are date select fields. Firstly, for when the first load of excess soil was or will be deposited, which as per our example was the 31st of March 2022. So I select my year and I change my month. Oops, March 31st, select that. Next, we're asked for the estimated date the final load of excess soil will be deposited. So this one we had defined as 31st of January 2025. So change my month, 31st of January 2025. On the next field, I'm asked to enter in the inventory amount of excess soil. You can utilize this information icon here, and you can see exactly what this field is asking for, is what is the amount of excess soil that was deposited on site before January 1st, 2022. So should that answer even be 0, I can enter in a 0 amount here. Then finally, the total amount of excess soil which is to be deposited. As you can see from this information icon, this should include any of the excess soil that was deposited at the reuse site before January 1st, 2022 as well. So for this one, I'll throw in our 225,000 cubic meters. Then I'll click on Save and Next. So as you can see from the chevrons at the top, this is our review page now. And on the review page, you can see all of the information that has been added to your filing, and you have the opportunity to click Edit to be able to jump back into any one of these sections in order to edit your inputs. By default, you will be brought to this page while your filing is at the in progress status from the dashboard. So I'll show what that looks like. So if I take a note of my notice ID number, I know it's number 51 at the top here. I can go back to my dashboard. See my number 51, that's great. It's right at the top here. I can see it's currently in progress. I can click on Continue, and then I'm brought back to that review page. So we'll scroll through, and once we're happy with all of the information that we've entered so far, site details, site instrument details, property uses, our soil details, our soil amounts, I can click on next. And this will take us to our summary page. So on the summary page, again, you can see all of the details that you've entered for your filing, and you can follow the steps on the right-hand side here in order to make a submission. So each section of the filing, very much similar to the review page, is in its own white box here. You'll now see that if that section has been complete and we have all the required information we need, it now has a green check mark on the top left as well. Once more, as with that review page, you have the ability to click on these edit buttons at the bottom right-hand side of any of the sections to be able to jump back into that section to make any of the changes. Then on the right-hand side, there are a few new widgets that are available to us compared to the review page. The top right, this is going to show our submission status, which is currently sitting at in progress. And then the second widget, that's going to show us how we can actually proceed with making the initial submission. And then finally, a little further down, we have the ability to download our filing as a PDF. So I click on the download PDF button here. This will allow you to save the full details of all the data that was entered into your filing and save it into a PDF format. So you can download that to your computer, or you can print it out if you so choose. So in order to actually make that initial submission, I have to follow a few steps, and I cannot actually progress to making that submission until I've completed all the required steps. So that's going to include completing all of the sections of the filing, which I've done, and they're indicated by those check marks, and then uploading a declaration. So I have the check marks. I know that the filing has all of the required data, and so the only step I have to take now is to upload the signed declaration form. As I may not actually have a copy of the declaration form already saved, I can download a fillable template here. I can open it up and show the fillable fields for you to enter in the information, make the check marks, and sign. So once that's all completed and signed, I can upload a completed declaration to the filing by clicking on the upload button. And I would select my completed declaration. So now that declaration has been uploaded, you can see that the applicable fee has been generated down below. You also see that I have the prompt to say that the declaration has been uploaded successfully. I can download a copy of my declaration should I wish to refer back to that. You can see here's a version that I've already completed. I can also remove this version and replace it with a different version should I choose to do so. So yes, now that that declaration is done, the fee payment has been calculated. In order to actually make the initial submission, I click on select payment method to arrange payment for that particular fee amount. So the applicable payment methods available to us, we have bank withdrawal, credit card, EDI payment method, check, or electronic bill payment. As you select one of these options, the applicable payment instructions below will update. So you can see here. So whereas you can actually provide payment instructions online if you were to choose a bank withdrawal or a credit card option, should you choose one of the other three options, you can still submit your filing, but you will receive a follow-up email on how to actually submit that payment. So once we've arranged for our payment and we've made that selection, we can follow the steps on the screen, should it be that credit card payment, or we can follow the steps here and click on submit. And once the submission has been made, you're going to see a confirmation message on the right-hand side here. And this will give you instructions on how to update the submission to a final submission in the future, which I will go through in a second. The user who actually makes the submission, so in this case would be Jax McKenna, and also the account admin for the user's company, so the account admin for Thorn Soil, both of those users will receive a confirmation email of the initial submission. You'll also notice on this page that our submission status has been updated to show initial submission. And then a little further down the right-hand side, you'll see confirmation of our payment, including the payment amount that was made, payment method, and I have the ability to download a copy of the invoice here. So I can click on that and generate the invoice that I paid. So it's important to note at this point, so now that the submission is at the initial submission status, that information which we discussed a bit earlier, that's now available to the public. And now our understanding is, because the final submission of this notice filing, it's going to be made weeks, months, if not years down the line. To recreate what that process would look like, you actually have to return to the dashboard in order to make that final submission. So I'm back on my dashboard. I can see my notice ID number 51. You can see that my status has been updated to the initial submission stage, and my actions available to me are to update or finalize that submission. So I click on the update and finalize, and I will be brought back to the summary page this time. So what's a little bit different this time is these fields on the right-hand side, they've been updated to require some additional information in order to make that final submission. So as you can see, I've been prompted to indicate that all of the excess soil required for the undertaking has been deposited. And then I'm asked to confirm the actual amount of soil that was deposited and the actual date that the final load was deposited. So I can check this box here. I can enter an actual amount. Let's say it was slightly higher than our estimation. And now if I was to select the date that the final load was deposited as being before the expected first load, then I will not actually be able to proceed. So the actual date, the final load, it cannot be before the date we had listed the first load would be deposited. So in this example, we'd actually list our first load of excess soil to be deposited on March 31st, 2022. So I need to select a date after then. So in this demonstration, we'll assume that the final load, we'll assume that it was actually deposited on the date we had originally expected, which would be 31st of January, 2025. Now you can see I can actually click on the save button and submit that information. So now that information has been accepted and saved, now I can upload my final submission declaration. So this functionality is very similar, if not the same as it was for the initial submission. I can download a copy of a blank reuse final declaration form, and then I can upload my signed version. Once more, you'll see that the file has been uploaded. I have access to download it should I choose, or remove or replaced. So in this particular example, based upon those entries that I put in and the amount of excess soil which is actually deposited, there is no fee owing for my final submission. And so here I will just see a $0 amount, and I can just click on the submit button without going through and selecting payment method. So I shall click on submit. And then in exactly the same way as the initial submission, the submission status on the top hand corner is going to change to final submission. And then there's a few other key differences on this page now. So you'll see that all of our sections are now locked as indicated by the padlock on the top left-hand side. Our final questions cannot be edited, and I cannot remove or replace the declarations which have been uploaded so far. So I can still download copies of my invoice. There is not going to be an invoice for the final submission because there was no payment amount, but I still have the ability to download a PDF. And this time you can see the submission status has been updated to final submission on my PDF. And so this actually concludes the deep dive into our reuse filing. And so I can return back to our deck here and pass this back to Pam, I believe.
Great. Thanks, John. As we had mentioned a little bit earlier, we did host 2 other training sessions within the past week or so. Those are all available on our website. Essentially, the first one talks about how to create an account, how to manage user access. It also goes into the whole notice access component of providing access to another company to input data as it relates to a specific notice filing. And then we also walk through the public experience portal. So again, that's available. The recording's available on our website along with the training deck. As you can see that the links are provided there once you receive this training deck later on today. Similar thing for our project area notice filing that was earlier this week, and it took a deep dive into the project area notice filing. This session will be available on our website as well, probably by the end of day. So these are resources that you can access at any point that you have some time to access it, along with some of our walkthrough guides, which really is a screenshot and a step-by-step sort of walkthrough guide to help you navigate the portal itself and sort of call out some of the inputs that would be required for you to proceed to the next screen. On our website as well, we do have some FAQs that talks about definitions of roles, so owners, operators, authorized persons, what those individuals can do within the registry. So you have those FAQs as well. We do talk a little bit about our fees as well in that FAQ session, that FAQ section. And then as John mentioned, it's likely that at the end of next week or the following week, we will have a pre-recorded video of a RDSD filing for those who want to explore that or may initiate one of those filings at a future date. You will have that resource available in the next week or so. So I can't remember what's in the next slide.
I think we're ready for the Q&A. So thank you, everybody. I can see that you have been upvoting questions. So we have just under half an hour for questions. So we'll try and get through as many of your questions as we can. The first one is from Colin, and they ask date of first load. What happens if it was, for example, 50 years ago, or you don't know at all? So yeah, in the case where people don't know when the first load was dug up, what should they do?
So this is the day that you are receiving the first load, right? So if we're talking about something that was potentially 50 years ago, that may be a question better answered by the ministry in the sense of, are you required to even initiate a reuse notice filing if that site has been operational for 50 years? That is a question that we can't answer. That's more of a regulatory question. As it relates though to any information that's being grandfathered in for like an operational site right now, or knowing at a future date when that first load may arrive. I think, again, it's proper documentation may be required. So I don't want to say that you should know, but it may be a question that it may be better addressed for the ministry at this point if you were unsure of when that first load was accepted, because that may be something specific within the regulation that they'll just be better equipped to answer that question for you. So we'll take it back, Ryan, and was it Ryan or was it Colin?
It was Colin, yeah.
Okay, it was Colin. We'll take that back and contact the ministry to see if we can provide some clarity on that.
Okay, thank you, Pam. The next question is from Ryan. So they ask, in the project area notice demonstration, there were two property types, linear versus non-linear. This does not appear to have also been applied for reuse sites. Can you explain the rationale for differentiating between linear and non-linear and for only doing so on the PA side?
Sure. So in the PA notice filing, we do have that distinction of a linear and a non-linear. And so I think our understanding when we were speaking with industry was that, like, for example, a non-linear project area would be kind of like a shape, like a group of connected properties. So you wouldn't use the endpoints, which is more of a linear sort of project, like a point A to a point B, like potentially a sewer maintenance. So that was specifically for the project area notice filing. Now with the reuse site. I think the difference is that there may be multiple properties within the reuse site, and so those would have to be identified. So it's a little bit different as to like how it was built. And I think, again, it ties into some of the specifics that were outlined in the regulation. So that's sort of high level the rationale as to why they're a little bit different in the property location section of each filing.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Next is from Jamie. They ask, you state that the reuse site filing does not include a waste disposal site. What happens to landfills? Are landfills required to be registered as the final destination site? And if so, how do you do that?
So I want to say again that that is a better question that is will be better answered by the ministry. Are landfills required to register as a reuse site? I think that's definitely a ministry question, but as it relates to a project area, if soil is being moved from a project area, that can go to a landfill site. That landfill site that is accepting soil from a project area, they don't have to be registered with the registry in order for a project leader or an authorized person to enter that landfill location within the registry. So I hope that answers your question or part of your question, Jamie.
Thank you. Next is from Rebecca. They ask, are fees for the reuse site based on the cumulative volume, which includes fill placed before January 1st, 2022, or is it based on fill volume being placed post January 1, 2022?
So if you're filing the notice today, because it's going to be an existing site that'll be operational as of Jan 1st, the amount that is accepted now will be what you're going to be charged for if you complete the initial submission. And then once the reuse site closes, whether it's in a year's time or in a couple of years' time, there is that second fee that will be paid, and it'll be the difference of what was the initial estimated amount versus what was actually deposited at that site. So it may be more, it may be less, but I guess what I'm saying is that there may not be a secondary fee if the initial estimated amount was pretty spot on.
Thank you. Next is from Colin again. Date of final load. We are registering an aggregate site that can take fill. We're assuming they will take more than 10,000 meters cubed over their life time, but the end date could be 20, 30 years in the future. How do you know the end date, I guess?
So the end date for, I want to make sure I answer this. So if the site is going to be operating for 20 or 30 years, I am unsure of whether you would be required to file a notice. I think that's a ministry question, but generally speaking, that let's say you can always make updates to the end date of that project. So let's say you initiated the notice, you thought it was going to end December 31st, 2023, that the site was going to close. But in fact, due to changes with the project schedule, that actually changes or moves forward, and maybe it's a December 1st end date, you can always update that within the registry. The only thing that cannot change is once the site closes, because there's a requirement to finalize notice once the site officially closes. And I think that's 30 days within that date. So the initial end date can change because, again, excuse me, the project can change, right? The life cycle of that project can change. The only thing that once the site officially closes, you do have to enter that end date, and that one has to be, for lack of a better term, accurate.
Okay, thank you. Next is from Aaron. Can we get a list of undertaking type and site instruments?
Oh, sorry, are these from the drop-down menus?
Yeah.
So the site instruments will be dependent. So I can verbally tell you what the site instruments are, if it'll be helpful for you. So there's the Aggregate Resources Act permit. There's a City of Toronto Act bylaw permit, Conservation Authorities Act permit, Environmental Protection Act approval, Environmental Protection Act certificate of property use, Municipal Act bylaw permit, Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act permit, and then there's also the Planning Act approval. And what was the other part of that question?
Site instruments.
So that was the
undertaking type.
The undertaking type might be, it's lengthy, so we can, if we have the name of the person, we can provide the list for sure.
Yeah, maybe we'll include them in the written responses that we will post. So keep an eye out for that, and maybe I don't know if that's useful to include in the training, in the section on the training materials webpage. We could look into including them there as well.
Sure.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, next is from Matthew. Is there a way to edit the volume placed at the reuse site after final submission is done? For example, after an audit of the site, you find out the volume reported was incorrect and should change. Can you do this after final submission?
So I want to say that you do have 30 days to sort of finalize that information before you actually have to come into the registry and click final submission. From our understanding, and I'm having a little bit of difficulty answering this question because I'm unsure if this is, it could be a conversation that we need to have with the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't answer that in case I misspeak. But generally speaking, once the final submission is finalized, there is no opportunity to make updates to that. So I think that's a bigger conversation that would be had with the ministry to see if we can provide that functionality to unlock the report, for lack of a better term. But I think it's a discussion to be had. So no real answer for you there. Sorry, Matthew.
Again, maybe that's something we can provide more details on in the written form, because we will have the opportunity to speak to the ministry before we finalize those answers. Ahmed, I see I have your hand up. Unfortunately, we're not allowed, we can't allow any attendees to speak, but if you have a question, please put it in writing in the Q&A and we'll try to get to it. Thank you. So the next question is from David, and they ask, does the declaration need to be signed by a signing authority of the company that owns the reuse site?
Does the declaration need to be signed by a signing authority? So we actually do have a sample of the declaration forms. And so I want to say that does the declaration need to be signed by a signing authority of the company that owns the reuse sites? I think that, yeah, I think that's right. So it has to be the owner or operator of the site, and whoever has the authority to say that this is an actual true statement on behalf of that owner or operator within that organization would make that declaration. But I encourage you to have a look at that. The declaration is available on our website.
It's on the Excess Soil Registry webpage. On the right-hand side, there's a list of the declarations. Okay, next from Kelly, only one account is permitted per organization. When municipalities, are there other types of services that would share the same account as the Excess Soil Registry? In one of the demonstrations, we noticed there were other modules related to waste stewardship programs, batteries, etc.
Okay, so this is a good question. So for the RPRA regulations that the authority oversees, which excludes excess soils, there may be existing municipalities who have registered because they may be a part of those programs. So if the case is that, let's say there's a specific department within a specific municipality that only deals with excess soils and will have no relation or no relationship essentially with their requirements under the batteries, tires regulation, anything like that, I would encourage you to contact us and we can help provide a workaround to be able for that department to create an account within the registry.
Thank you. Next, another one from Colin. What is the purpose of multiple properties under a reuse site? Do you have an example?
So I think that is something, again, that's outlined in the reg, that there's a location that you must identify the location of each property that's in whole or in part within the reuse site. So an example, I don't know an example off the top of my head, but really that requirement to identify different locations was built in the system because of what's outlined in the reg. But again, we could take this back potentially and get an example, like a real case scenario as to when this would apply.
Okay, next is from Inshun, another one on instruments. What types of instruments are included as options under Planning Act approvals?
So give me a second, I can very quickly say which one it is. So the issuing authorities, right? Or what types of instruments?
Instruments, yeah.
So our understanding is that the instrument type is sort of like a license or a certificate. So essentially the Planning Act approval would be the instrument type.
Okay, thank you. Next, one more from Colin. Does the owner mean the actual owner or an employee of the company that owns the site?
So you would identify the company name as the owner, whether the owner is John Smith and you've entered John Smith there as a contact. We still need to have an individual identified, right? So it could be somebody that works for the business if it is not the actual business owner. That obviously, and that person has to work within the company that's being identified as the owner.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more from Colin. What did you mean by volume independent when entering the standards?
So the volume independent is, I think it's taken from the soil management rules. So it's rules for soil management and excess soil quality standards. So if you have specific questions as to what that actually means, again, Helen, that is a ministry question. So we'll take that back and have someone from the policy branch potentially reach out to you.
Okay. One more from Colin. Inventory before January 1, 2022. What if you don't know?
So again, I want to say that when you initiate a filing, it's the information that you have. What am I trying to say here? It's information that it's the amount of information that. Sorry, I'm tripping on my words here, but essentially, it's information that you think is accurate at that moment, right? And so work can be done afterwards to update that information that was entered when you first started when you first started filling out the information. So it's not like you enter at one time and you initiate the notice and then it's set in stone. You can come back and update that information. So if you don't know when you first initiate the filing, you can come back to that field and edit it.
Okay, next is from Kelly. Do actual dates of final loads have to have been in the past to enter/save?
Yeah, so, and I think John demonstrated the fact that if you estimated that the final load was going to be December 3rd, but it was actually December 2nd, you have to change the initial estimated date of final load in order for you to be able to input the new date, but essentially the date has to have passed. You can't close or finalize a notice filing if the date is, if it's a future date. So it does have to be in the past.
Next from an anonymous attendee, what are the fees to do a project area filing and a reuse filing? Maybe I can answer this one. So we have just posted the fees related to using the Excess Soil Registry. We posted them earlier this week and they are on the Excess Soil Registry page as part of the listed resources. So in there, there'll be more details as to how much you would pay for each of the 3 notice filing types. So please refer to that page on our website for more information. Thank you. Okay, next is from Carol. We are a soil receiver with 2 reuse sites. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. Do we?
So I guess I will say this, that if you have independent reuse sites, I believe that you have to initiate 2 independent notice filings.
Yeah.
If you wanna, if that didn't answer your question, Carol, please type a follow-up in there in the chatter.
Okay, next is from Ryan. Will it actually allow you to pick a future date for, so we've answered that already.
Yeah, so again, just to clarify, you can input a future date in the initial notice, but once you finalize the notice itself, the expectation is that the site is no longer operational, that all of the soil has been received, and there is no need to put a future date because you're finalizing after the project has ended.
A follow-up question from Colin on date entries. So Colin says, but that goes back to my other question. Is site maybe accepting fill over the years since the 1960s? There's no way to have a number of when they started or how much they took. We have been told that we have to register. What do we do?
So I think we can take this one offline and try to put you in contact with someone who can get you more of a definitive answer to this, Colin, because I don't know if you've been told that it's a requirement. I can't say yes or no. Like, only we can offer sort of the portal and the system for you to be able to input that data and what you should put if you don't know the exact date of when the first load was accepted because it was backdated. I think that's, again, a conversation that probably needs to be had offline, sorry.
Okay. So I think that's it for questions. We managed to get through all of them. Okay, so people just sharing more information in there in the Q&A there. So I think we're good to progress to feedback. So just 3 questions in here, and I will just launch a poll. So you should be able to respond, see that on your screen and respond to the poll. So just give us some feedback on how you found today's session, and also we just wanted to know when people will anticipate that they will start filing notices, just for us to prepare our registry support team. So if you could just let us know that on the 3rd question as well. I'll just give it a minute to give everybody an opportunity to answer all 3. Okay, I think maybe most people have answered, so I'm going to end the poll. Thank you for that feedback. It's very valuable to us. Next, we'll just give you some information about how you can contact us and get more information. So the page I kept mentioning, where you can find all the resources and training materials, etc., is the website there, www.rpra.ca/Excess Soil Registry. As Pam mentioned already, that's where all of these recordings and training materials live, as well as the declarations that we mentioned, and a whole bunch of other hopefully useful information. If you have any questions when you start using the registry, or any follow-up questions that we didn't get to, or you didn't get a chance to ask, please email them to registry@rpra.ca, and our registry support team will get back to you as soon as they can. So I think that brings us to the end of today's session. Pam and John, do you have any final words?
No, nothing for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, nothing on my end either. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. And again, any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to us by email.
Okay,
thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye now.